The hour is just past midnight on a trembling August night in 1944, and Europe feels as if it is holding its breath. The Allied armies have burst out of Normandy with such force that the German lines no longer resemble defenses at all. They look more like the remains of a wall someone kicked through. Patton's Third Army does not advance so much as it lunges forward. 30 miles, 40. Some days, even 50. No one predicted movement like this. No one imagined this kind of speed. Yet speed is a blessing that carries its own curse. A curse measured not in enemy fire, but in fuel hoses that run dry. In ammunition stockpiles that cannot seem to refill fast enough. In trucks that struggle to keep up with the very army they are trying to feed. Every Sherman tank devours fuel with the appetite of a living thing. Every infantry division consumes hundreds of tons of supplies a day just to exist. But the ports behind them are still broken, half-repaired, wounded by German demolitions. Everything that keeps an army alive has to travel on trucks that rattle across long French roads, still scarred by retreating troops. They haul bullets, bandages, fuel, hope, but hope has weight, and the roads groan under it. Inside headquarters, officers stare at numbers that feel like warnings whispered by a collapsing world. Supplies vanish before they reach the soldiers who need them. Trucks crash on dark roads. German fighters dive on convoys that look like bright trails of opportunity from the sky. The Third Army begins reporting what no commander ever wants to hear. We are running out. We cannot move. We are stranded without a single enemy soldier in sight. Eisenhower listens as if each sentence is a tightening fist around the war's throat. If Patton stops, the Germans will have time to pull themselves together. If he continues without supplies, his army will be swallowed by impossibility. The commanders argue in circles, trapped by their own doctrines, unable to imagine a way out. Far from the polished tables and neat maps, a truck idles beside a road littered with the skeletons of vehicles that did not survive the day. The smell of burned rubber and twisted metal clings to the air. Technical Sergeant Raymond Kowalsski sits behind his wheel, staring at the charred remains of 8 trucks that will never complete their journeys. A Luftwaffe strafing run found them crowded on a narrow road. They had no room to scatter. They burned where they stood. He lights a cigarette with a hand that has seen more broken axles than rifles. 34 years old. A truck driver from Pittsburgh long before he wore a uniform. Not the kind of man who writes doctrine. Not the kind of man generals invite into strategy meetings. He knows engines. He knows weather. He knows that a truck convoy is both a miracle and a funeral procession waiting to happen. He remembers something an old dispatcher once told him during a winter run through the Allegheny Mountains. Convoys look impressive, but spacing is what gets the job done. At the time, Kowalski thought it sounded like the kind of wisdom you only understand after a lifetime on the road. Tonight, while staring at twisted metal under a bruised sky, he realizes it might also be the difference between life and death. Over 2 weeks of driving along France's battered roads, he watches a pattern emerge. Convoys are the ones dying, not because the Germans are too strong, but because the trucks are too close, too predictable, too easy to see from above. A line of 20 trucks is not 20 deliveries. It is one glowing target stretching across the earth. But the scattered trucks? The ones that slip away from the depots early because they are impatient or bored or lucky? Those trucks arrive, almost all of them. Even when spotted, they are rarely worth the ammunition to attack. One truck is a nuisance, not a prize. A convoy is a prize worth killing for. He runs the numbers in his notebook, the same notebook where he keeps track of miles and repair notes. 23% losses for convoys. Less than 3% for independent trucks. The math is painful in its simplicity. Painful because no one wants to see it. On August 25th, he presents his idea to Captain Dennis Hayes. He lays out the logic as carefully as he knows how. Trucks should not wait for one another. They should leave as soon as they are loaded. They should spread themselves like seeds scattered in the wind. Hayes does not need more than a minute to dismiss him. The captain looks at the grease-stained hands, the worn boots, the rough edges of a man who learned his trade on American highways, not in military academies. Hayes gives the kind of answer that makes a man feel small. "You are a truck driver, Kowalski. Let the trained officers handle the tactics." The proposal travels up the chain only long enough to gather ink telling him he is wrong. Protocol says convoys are safer. Tradition says convoys are safer. Rank says convoys are safer. Everyone says convoys are safer. But the roads whisper another truth, one that the officers do not hear, one that only someone who has spent a lifetime behind a steering wheel can understand. The rejection does not stop him, though it bruises him in ways he will not admit. He tries speaking to a lieutenant colonel next. This officer listens longer but shakes his head, insisting that a broken truck alone on a road could be ambushed. That safety is in numbers. That doctrine must be obeyed. People laugh at him behind his back. Some say he is reckless. Others say he is scared. Some drivers refuse to sit with him in the mess tent, afraid his ideas might invite trouble. Innovation is lonely work. Truth is lonelier. Yet 3 drivers start appearing beside him after hours. Quiet voices, nervous glances. They tell him they see what he sees. The math does not care about rank. The skies do not care about tradition. The bullets do not ask for permission before finding clustered targets. Then something unexpected happens. Someone important reads his rejected proposal. Someone who does not sleep well these days. Someone who carries the weight of the entire war on his shoulders. Lieutenant General Walter Bedell Smith, Eisenhower's chief of staff, picks up the crumpled idea that everyone else ignored. He asks a simple question. If convoys are safe, why are we losing nearly a quarter of everything we send? It is a question no one wants to answer. Smith orders Kowalski to appear before him. The sergeant walks into the tent smelling like fuel and exhaustion, certain that this meeting will end his career. Instead, Smith asks him to explain his idea as if he is teaching it to a man who has never driven a truck before. Kowalski explains that unpredictability is protection, that a scattered pattern is not chaos, it is survival, that an enemy who must work 10 times harder to find one target will eventually stop trying. The room grows so quiet that even the rain outside seems to pause to listen. The numbers do not lie. They simply wait for someone brave enough to see them. Smith orders a trial. 20 trucks, 1 week. If the losses drop, the entire Red Ball Express will change. If it fails, the blame will be heavy enough to crush the man who suggested it. On the first morning of September, the experiment begins. Trucks begin rolling out as soon as they are loaded. No waiting, no formations, no pageantry, just movement, one at a time. Quiet, steady, unpredictable. Trucks become ghosts drifting across France, silent and solitary. Observers protest. They take notes with trembling outrage. The rules are being broken. The sacred doctrine is being undone. But the roads respond with their own truth. Trucks begin arriving early. Not late, not damaged, not burning. All 20 trucks complete their runs. Not one is lost. The German fighters that spot a few of them simply shake their wings and turn elsewhere. One truck is not worth the gasoline. By day 3 of the trial, even the doubters start falling silent. The results are undeniable. Trucks are safer when they are alone. The war moves faster when it does not wait for ceremony. On September 7th, the order is given. The entire Red Ball Express will now run under the system that a truck driver invented, while sitting beside the wreckage of men who should not have died. The change happens so quickly that even the veterans of the Transport Corps feel as if the ground has shifted under their feet. The Red Ball Express, which once crawled across France in proud, vulnerable chains of 20 truck columns, is reborn almost overnight into something fluid, restless, and strangely alive. Trucks now leave the depots every few minutes, like heartbeats, a steady pulse carrying life forward. There is no more waiting for full formations, no more lines that stretch across courtyards like slow-moving funerals. A truck is loaded, checked, handed its orders, and released. It merges into the road with a kind of quiet dignity, knowing that the next truck will follow minutes later, and the next minutes after that. It becomes a river, not a parade. And rivers are hard to catch. Even the Germans begin to sense that something has changed. Their pilots look down from their cockpits and see only single trucks threading their way through the countryside. No patterns, no clusters, nothing that makes sense on a map. Some pilots tip their wings in frustration and fly back to base without firing. Others make a single attack run, only to realize that shooting one truck does not change the direction of the war anymore. The skies, once full of predators waiting for easy prey, begin to empty. In the first 8 weeks after the change, the numbers shift in ways that feel almost unbelievable. Supply losses plummet from nearly a quarter of all shipments to less than 3%. Delivery times grow shorter. Fuel and ammunition begin reaching Patton's troops in amounts that would have been inconceivable only a month earlier. Soldiers who once rationed every bullet now find themselves receiving more than they asked for. The war begins to move again. 30. Front stretches forward like a waking giant. The Germans feel the pressure on their spine. A strange irony settles over the battlefields. Armies win victories with courage, but they maintain those victories with gasoline. The tanks that roar across Europe are not symbols of power by themselves. They are just metal shells without fuel. But fuel arrives every day, every hour, every minute, because the trucks keep moving, because the roads finally belong to someone who knows how to read them. Historians will later debate which battle, which strategy, which commander turned the tide of the war in the West. But in quiet corners of military archives, there is another story whispered among those who study logistics. A story about a man who did not wear the authority of a general, but carried the weight of common sense. His notebook, filled with crude calculations and grease smudges, begins circulating through headquarters. Officers who once dismissed him start quoting him. Young lieutenants treat his observations like scripture. The idea spreads further than anyone expected. British commanders in Italy test the method and send back the same verdict. Dispersed movement is survival. Commanders in the Pacific review his notes as they plan their island-hopping campaigns. His insight, born on a roadside covered in the remains of a broken convoy, begins shaping the way militaries move for generations. What is remarkable is how quiet the man behind the revolution remains. Kowalsski continues to drive as if nothing extraordinary has happened. He still fixes his own tires. He still argues with mechanics. He still eats in the same mess halls where some soldiers used to avoid sitting near him. Now those same soldiers sit closer, though they do not always know what to say. Some simply nod. A few mutter thanks. Recognition moves slowly in war, but word eventually reaches Eisenhower. An intelligence report describing German frustration includes a single line from a captured officer. The line reads like an admission of defeat carved into the margins of history. We can no longer hunt their trucks. They appear without pattern. They vanish without reason. They are everywhere and nowhere. Eisenhower circles that line on the page. He writes a final remark. This method has changed the battlefield. Recognition is due. 2 days after the Red Ball Express completes its mission, on November 18, 1944, Raymond Kowalsski stands in front of a group of officers as a Bronze Star medal is pinned to his uniform. The citation mentions innovation, exceptional service, and improved operational effectiveness. It does not mention the nights he spent staring at burning trucks. It does not mention the shouting, the laughter, the doubt. It does not mention how close he came to giving up. Some stories are too large for medals, Some changes cannot be captured in a few sentences. After the war, he returns home to Pittsburgh. The world is tired of war by then, and he does not talk much about what he did. He drives trucks again. The same roads, the same hills, the same steel shipments. He wears no sign that he changed the way armies move across continents. His neighbors know him only as a veteran, a quiet one, a man who works hard and minds his own. The Bronze Star stays in a drawer. His notebook stays on a shelf. But the military does not forget. In 1947, his staggered dispatch method becomes official doctrine. At Fort Lee, every logistics officer learns the lesson he wrote in the margins of history. A predictable supply chain is a vulnerable one. Spread the risk. Move continuously. Make the enemy's effort too costly. Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, Afghanistan. Across every conflict, the principle survives. Never gather your lifelines in one place. Never give the enemy a single target. Civilian industries begin adopting the same logic. Companies realize that spacing creates resilience. Deliveries begin to leave warehouses throughout the day, not in clustered waves. Global supply chains learn to stagger, scatter, and flow. The world grows faster because one man refused to ignore what he saw in the wreckage. In 2003, the Army Transportation Museum builds a display honoring the Red Ball Express. Inside the glass case sits a small object that carries the weight of a revolution. Kowalski's old notebook. The pages are yellowed. The handwriting leans sideways as if written in motion. There are columns of numbers, circles around percentages, quick sketches of roads and arrows and spacing estimates. Beside it is a photograph of him leaning against his GMC truck, a cigarette dangling from his fingers, the face of a man who has spent his life solving problems that others do not see until it is too late. The placard offers a truth so simple that it feels almost like a whispered confession. Sometimes the greatest innovations come from those who live closest to the problem. He passes away in 1983. His obituary mentions his medal, but not the legacy that grew out of a moment on a French roadside when he looked at the wreckage and dared to ask, "Why does it have to be this way?" Decades later, in every military classroom, in every logistics dissertation, in every modern discussion about supply chain resilience, his name appears again, often as a footnote. A reminder that one mind can change the direction of a war not with a rifle, but with an idea. The world continues to move according to the quiet logic he uncovered. Trucks depart in staggered intervals. Routes vary. Patterns dissolve. Predictability is treated as a weakness. The enemy cannot strike what it cannot find. And somewhere, in the unseen machinery of modern life, a man from Pittsburgh still guides the flow of fuel and food and hope across continents. He proved something few believed: that survival sometimes depends not on strength or numbers, but on the courage to see what everyone else overlooks. All because, in a moment when the war seemed to be devouring its own lifelines, a truck driver refused to accept that the old way was the only way.